In 1962, a drunk fan at Liverpool's concert arena stood up mid-song and screamed insults at 4 world-famous musicians at the height of their success, calling them talentless moptops who looked like girls. The entire venue fell dead silent as the lead singer's face flushed with anger, and everyone expected a heated confrontation that would end their career before it even began. But what John Lennon did next was so unexpected and powerful that it not only saved that night, but would you believe it actually taught the Beatles the secret to handling hostile crowds that made them legendary? The summer heat of 1962 hung thick in the vast concert hall, where cigarette smoke mixed with the sweat of thousands of bodies filling every seat in the arena. The venue echoed with anticipation as thousands of fans in their best clothes swayed to the rhythm, waiting for the band that had conquered the world to take the massive stage. The air itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, thick enough to cut with a knife, as another Saturday night in Liverpool's most famous arena prepared to unfold. Tonight, 4 lads from Liverpool were setting up their equipment under the brilliant array of professional stage lights that bathed the entire venue in dramatic illumination. The expansive stage, large enough for multiple drum kits and equipment setups, gleamed under professional lighting rigs that had travelled the world with them. Electrical cords snaked across the floor in dark tangles, held down by strips of gaffer tape that had been applied and reapplied so many times they looked like battle scars. John Lennon adjusted his microphone stand, his calloused fingers working the metal joints with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. His eyes, sharp and intelligent behind wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the sea of faces below. The audience was restless tonight, hungry for something to either love or destroy. He could feel their energy like electricity in the air, dangerous, unpredictable, ready to spark in any direction. Behind him, Paul McCartney plucked at his bass strings, each note reverberating through the vast space with crystal clarity. The sound filled every corner of the arena, mixing with the murmur of thousands of conversations, the clink of glasses and the movement of feet on polished floors. George Harrison's fingers danced across his guitar neck in a final sound check, coaxing familiar melodies from strings that had been restrung too many times and tuned in too many different venues. His youthful face was serious, concentrated, already lost in the music that was about to flow from his instrument. Meanwhile, Ringo Starr settled behind his drum kit with the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to keep time in Hamburg's roughest clubs, where a missed beat could mean the difference between applause and flying bottles. The arena's atmosphere was electric, a mixture of expensive perfumes, excited chatter, and the anticipation of 20,000 fans, and the indefinable scent of dreams being chased by young people who refused to accept that life had to be ordinary. The arena's towering walls seemed to amplify the sound and send it soaring through the space with incredible power. The vast expanse created an electric energy that connected performer and audience across thousands of seats in a shared experience of live music at its most powerful. These weren't the screaming fans who would later chase them down streets. These were fans from all walks of life who had paid premium prices to see the most famous band in the world perform live. They'd cheer you to the rafters or boo you off the stage with equal enthusiasm, and tonight they seemed particularly volatile, as if they'd been waiting all week for something to happen, anything to break the monotony of factory work and grey Liverpool days. Near the back of the room, partially obscured by shadows and smoke, a man in his 30s swayed dangerously with a pint of bitter in his weathered hand. His work shirt was stained with grease and sweat, his tie loosened and askew, and his stance radiated barely contained aggression, like a storm on the horizon. Yet beneath the confident exterior each member presented to the crowd, deeper personal struggles weighed heavily on their minds. Behind the confident facade of 4 young musicians commanding the stage, deeper currents of anxiety and desperation flowed like underground rivers. John Lennon's fingers pressed harder against his guitar strings than necessary, each chord carrying the weight of recent tragedy. Just 4 years earlier, his mother Julia had been struck down by a car driven by an off-duty policeman, leaving him with a wound that music could soothe but never fully heal. Every performance was both an escape from that pain and a tribute to the woman who had first taught him to play. Paul McCartney's smile never wavered as he sang harmony, but his mind raced with the pressures of fame, the constant scrutiny, the weight of expectations, the fear that one misstep could damage everything they'd built. The Beatles had achieved more success than they'd ever dreamed, but with that success came crushing responsibility and the knowledge that millions of fans were counting on them. George Harrison, barely 19, and the baby of the group, fought to prove he belonged on that stage with every note he played. The others had history. John and Paul had been writing songs together since they were teenagers, but George had to earn his place day by day, performance by performance. His parents had been amazed by his musical success, but he could still see the lingering worry in his mother Louise's eyes whenever he left for another major performance, remembering the uncertain early days. Ringo Starr, the newest member, still felt like he was auditioning every time he sat behind the drum kit. He joined the group earlier that year, and the change hadn't been popular with all the fans. Some nights, he could still hear whispers of "We want Pete" from the crowd. Born Richard Starkey in Liverpool's roughest neighbourhood, he'd already survived rheumatic fever and a burst appendix that had nearly killed him. Playing music was literally a matter of life and death. It was the only thing that made him feel truly alive. Tonight's performance at the concert arena carried extra weight. Word had gotten out that there might be record company scouts in the audience, music executives who had already helped transform 4 working-class lads into the biggest band in the world. But that same possibility brought crushing pressure. One wrong note, one hostile crowd, one disastrous evening could slam the door on their future before it even opened. The Beatles had been building their reputation gig by gig, grinding through Hamburg's brutal club scene where they'd learned to play for hours without breaks, dodging bottles and hostile drunks who saw rock and roll as a threat to everything they held dear. Each performance was a test of survival, and tonight, with the stakes higher than ever, they could feel the familiar tension that came with walking a tightrope between success and failure, between dreams and the harsh reality of 1962 Liverpool, where young men like them were expected to find factory jobs and forget about changing the world. As they launched into their opening number, none of them could have predicted how one hostile voice would teach them a lesson about grace under pressure. The second verse of Twist and Shout was building to its crescendo when the drunk man's voice cut through the music as sharp as broken glass. "You look like bloody girls." His words slurred but carried enough venom to slice through the warm atmosphere that had been building in the arena. The bass line faltered first, Paul's fingers stumbling over strings as the unexpected hostility struck him with crushing force. "Get off the stage, you talentless moptops," the man continued, his voice growing stronger and more vicious with each word. He raised his pint glass high above his head like a weapon, beer sloshing over the rim and splashing onto the people around him. The audience began to shift, some turning to look at the heckler, others pressing closer to the stage as if sensing something explosive was about to happen. John's voice cracked on the next line, the harmony dissolving into awkward silence, as George's guitar continued for 2 more measures before trailing off into nothing. Ringo's drumsticks hovered frozen above his snare, caught mid-beat like a photograph of disaster. The concert arena, which moments before had been alive with music and movement, fell into the kind of dead silence that makes ears ring and hearts pound. Thousands of pairs of eyes darted between the stage and the drunk man, waiting to see what would happen next. Some of the younger girls near the front looked frightened, clutching their friends' arms. The older men in the crowd crossed their arms and watched with the grim fascination of spectators at a street fight. A few nervous laughs bubbled up from different corners of the room, quickly stifled by the tension that had settled over the venue like a heavy blanket. John's face had gone pale, then flushed deep red as blood rushed to his cheeks. His knuckles went white as he gripped his guitar neck, and for a moment, everyone in that room could see the anger building behind his eyes as storm clouds gather on the horizon. This was the moment that could define everything, the crossroads between the young men they were and the legends they might become. Paul took a half step backward, his bass hanging slack in his hands. George looked down at his feet, his dark hair falling across his face as a protective veil. Ringo sat perfectly still behind his drum kit, as if moving might shatter whatever fragile balance was keeping the situation from exploding into chaos. The drunk man swayed more violently now, emboldened by the silence and the attention. "What's wrong? Pretty boys? Cat got your tongues?" He took a stumbling step forward, his beer-soaked shirt clinging to his chest, his eyes wild with the kind of liquid courage that had started more fights than it had ever finished. Voices started rising from different corners, some supportive of the band, others curious to see how far this confrontation would go. In that moment of suspended time, with the future hanging in the balance and thousands of witnesses holding their collective breath, John Lennon stood at the edge of a precipice that would either destroy his dreams or teach him something profound about the power of unexpected grace under fire. Instead of the explosion everyone expected, John Lennon set down his guitar with deliberate care and walked to the edge of the stage. His movements were slow, measured, completely at odds with the fire that had been burning in his eyes just moments before. The crowd tensed, expecting him to leap down and start swinging, but John simply sat on the edge of the platform, his legs swinging freely. "You know what, mate?" John's voice carried across the silent arena, conversational and surprisingly gentle. "You're probably right about the hair." A few scattered chuckles rippled through the audience, but the tension remained thick as soup. "We do look a bit like girls, don't we?" He ran his fingers through his famous mop top, grinning with self-deprecating humour that caught everyone off guard. The drunk man's raised glass wavered, his momentum disrupted by this unexpected response. He'd come looking for a fight and found a response that completely disarmed him. Genuine human connection. What?" he slurred, confusion replacing aggression in his bloodshot eyes. John continued, his voice growing warmer with each word. "We're just 4 lads from Liverpool, same as you probably. Born in the same hospitals, went to the same kind of schools, got yelled at by the same kind of headmasters." The entire room leaned in, captivated by his gentle approach. "We're not trying to be better than anyone. We're just trying to make music that makes people feel something good for a few minutes." Paul stepped forward, understanding washing over his face as comprehension dawned on his features. "That's all any of us are doing, really. Just trying to make something beautiful in a world that can be pretty ugly sometimes." His voice harmonized with John's words the way it did with his melodies, perfectly, naturally. The drunk man's arm began to lower. His beer glass no longer a weapon, but just a glass again. His expression began to change, the hard lines softening as alcohol-induced rage gave way to a different kind of vulnerability. I lost my job last week," he mumbled, the admission tumbling out as if a floodgate had opened. "Wife's been giving me hell about it." John nodded with understanding that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his 22 years. "Music won't fix that, but maybe it can help you forget about it for a little while. That's what it does for us." He stood up and extended his hand toward the man. "What's your name?" "Tommy," the man replied, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Tommy Fletcher." "Well, Tommy Fletcher, how about you come up here and help us finish this song? Show these people what a real Liverpool voice sounds like." The invitation transformed the entire atmosphere of the room. Applause erupted from every corner, not the polite applause of obligation, but the genuine enthusiasm of people witnessing something special. Tommy shuffled forward through the crowd, which stepped aside to create a clear path. Someone helped boost him onto the stage, where he stood swaying slightly next to John, looking bewildered by this turn of events. John counted them in, and they launched back into Twist and Shout, with Tommy's rough, untrained voice adding a working-class authenticity that the song had never possessed before. Years later, when the Beatles were playing to stadiums full of screaming fans, John would remember this moment as the night he learned that the most powerful weapon against hostility wasn't anger, it was unexpected kindness. The lesson would serve them well through countless encounters with difficult crowds, hostile journalists and critics who questioned everything from their music to their hair to their right to change the world. But it all started in a packed concert arena in Liverpool, where a drunk man's insults became a masterclass in turning enemies into friends through nothing more than basic human decency.